Quantitative easing is one of the most misunderstood forces in modern financial markets. You see it talked about constantly. The truth is it's rarely understood correctly at its core and almost always misrepresented. Every single time the Fed expands its balance sheet, the term quantitative easing gets thrown around immediately and the narratives begin to spread online pretty fast. I'm sure you've seen that. But the truth is, most of what's being labeled as quantitative easing today actually is not quantitative easing at all. So in this video, I'm going to break down and explain in simple terms what quantitative easing actually is, what it really looks like, why it matters so much for risk on assets, and most importantly, how quantitative easing directly impacts risk on assets, especially cryptocurrencies and digital assets. Now, once you fully understand what quantitative easing really is, how it plays out, and how liquidity truly moves through the financial system once QE begins, and the difference between real quantitative easing and actually what's happening now, then you'll be able to stop reacting to the narratives, to the headlines, and you'll be able to start strategically positioning yourself with clarity, conviction, and intent ahead of the curve. So we'll start with the most basic question. What is quantitative easing? Quantitative easing, also known as QE for short, is pretty much a last resort monetary policy tool. So at its core, quantitative easing consists of basically large-scale asset purchases that are funded by newly created bank reserves. Now, this is not physical money printing in that sense, but essentially central banks create digital-based money in the computer known as reserves. And they use it to purchase government bonds and, in extreme cases, other financial assets. Now, while it's often dressed up with softer language, of course, quantitative easing is extremely inflationary in practice. Now, in essence, large-scale money creation is what it really is, just in a digital form, regardless of what the policymakers choose to label it as. It's still very inflationary. And quantitative easing is not just a routine balance sheet maintenance or some technical adjustment that they do once in a while. It's basically an emergency response that only appears when all conventional Fed policy tools fail and don't work anymore. Historically, central banks always start with rate cuts, forward guidance, and of course, eventually liquidity facilities. Quantitative easing actually only appears and plays out once those tools are exhausted in extreme financial stress conditions. So when policy rates are effectively at or near zero, and at the same time, when the financial system is already under serious stress. It shows up basically after the cracks have already formed and when something meaningful in the financial system is actually breaking down. The purpose of quantitative easing is to come at that moment, not just to fine-tune the economy. It's about survival. And that's why it's a last-minute resort when all other tools fail. So quantitative easing has basically become an interesting feature of modern banking during the 2008 financial crisis and was reinforced again in 2020. And the United States, Europe, the United Kingdom, and Japan pretty much all followed the same playbook. When something breaks and the system is at complete risk of failure, central banks work together and they step in as a buyer of last resort in order to keep the system, the financial system, from collapsing under its own weight. That's when quantitative easing plays out. So, what does quantitative easing actually look like in real life? Well, simply put, we do have two examples that happened in the past, but we'll start here. What we're seeing today is actually not quantitative easing, but it is liquidity positive. Now, anytime the Fed expands its balance sheet, as I said earlier, commentators, influencers rush to call it quantitative easing immediately. But that's a misunderstanding, because the truth is, balance sheet expansion alone does not equal quantitative easing, even though that's what they're doing right now. They're doing balance sheet expansion. So you can call what's happening right now stealth QE if you want, but the distinction actually does matter. The fact that the Fed is already intervening tells us that stress is already building beneath the surface in the financial system. Now, the plumbing of the financial system is tightening and cracks are starting to form. But even if the headlines haven't caught up yet, that's actually what's happening now. But it's not quantitative easing because the full-blown crisis phase has not happened yet. But when it does, that's when true quantitative easing arrives. Quantitative easing does not arrive preemptively. It arrives after, when policymakers have no other choices left. It shows up only after the traditional, conventional tools stop working. Basically, after credit markets seize up, like we saw in 2008, after liquidity evaporates like in 2020, and after something extremely meaningful in the system has broken. That's the moment when you see the multi-trillion-dollar liquidity wave, massive base money creation, and extremely aggressive balance sheet expansion designed specifically only to prevent systemic collapse. It's those moments when the central banks step in and they're forced to create new base money and basically purchase assets at scale in order to stabilize markets and keep the financial system from imploding. That's when you see quantitative easing. That's what it will look like. And that's the key difference. So what we're seeing today is not quantitative easing, even though it is balance sheet expansion. But it is an early signal, but it's not the final response. So QE is not here and it hasn't come yet. Now, I go actually much deeper into this sequencing on how these phases unfold and how I'm positioning around them inside my weekly newsletter and in my financial market intelligence group. So if you do want a deeper analysis and real informational edge, then check out my newsletter and my financial market intelligence group. I'm going to give you a lot of information that is way beyond the mainstream narrative, and you could find that in the description below. So moving on, how does quantitative easing actually move through the system? That liquidity, once QE begins, how does it flow through the system? Well, simply put, when quantitative easing begins during a crisis, central banks, their balance sheet has to expand extremely rapidly, okay? Now, markets begin to stabilize, yields compress, confidence starts to return a little bit, and they basically prevent a systemic collapse. Now, liquidity is injected into the financial system during that period. But this is where most people misunderstand what happens next. Because once that liquidity is injected into the financial system, the liquidity does not flow evenly and get distributed evenly into the real economy. It actually moves through very specific channels, and that sequence is actually what matters. So the first place quantitative easing shows up inside the financial system itself is not on Main Street, but that newly created reserve flows into primary dealers first, repo markets, money market funds, and also sovereign bond markets first. That's where it goes. Now, these are the closest that the people would be to the monetary spigot. It's the big players, the financial institutions. They receive the bulk of that liquidity first before it hits households' wages and before it even hits consumer prices. So those recipients don't sit on that capital when they receive it, the big players. They actually deploy it immediately into financial assets pretty quickly as soon as they get it. That's the structure. So this is quantitative easing in its true form. It doesn't appear during periods of economic strength. It comes only after something in the system has fundamentally broken and policymakers have no other option left. So why does quantitative easing massively amplify risk on markets and especially cryptocurrencies after QE takes place and that liquidity goes into the financial system? Why? Well, once quantitative easing liquidity really hits the system, the effects are clear and intentional. We all know this. First, you'll see asset inflation come first, not consumer inflation. But consumer inflation actually follows later in the months and in the coming year. And the start of quantitative easing, of course, policy rates are historically at or near zero. Cash yields pretty much nothing. Bonds offer almost no real return. So safe assets no longer preserve purchasing power. And smart money understands this. So in this type of environment with QE, capital isn't just encouraged to take risk. It's forced to. So that liquidity from the quantitative easing doesn't flow directly to the households first, as we stated earlier. It goes to the big players in the system, institutions, the banks, primary dealers, money markets, hedge funds, and large asset managers like BlackRock. They get the new reserves at the front of the line before anybody else. And that capital quickly moves into financial assets and financial markets like equities, stocks, credit, real estate, private markets, and finally, of course, beta assets with high risk, high reward like crypto. And that absorbs all the liquidity before it even reaches your average person. So that's why asset prices move first and fastest during quantitative easing cycles. Now, this creates a very, very predictable sequence once you understand this structure. First, liquidity enters the financial system. That's quantitative easing getting started. Second, yields compress across safe assets. They come down. Third, institutions take that capital and rotate it outwards along the risk curve in search of greater returns. Fourth, higher beta assets like cryptocurrencies and digital assets and stocks actually receive most of that liquidity, that marginal liquidity. So this rotation isn't optional. Pensions, insurers, endowments, and asset managers with a lot of that money, they don't just sit on cash during quantitative easing without locking in real losses, and they understand that. So they allocate that into assets that actually survive and beat currency debasement on a grand scale. And this is basically called structural capital displacement, not just speculation. So you see all this money flow into certain asset classes which amplify the prices. So these two forces then work together. You got liquidity expansion because the Fed's expanding their balance sheet. This debases their currency. So that's one force that pushes asset prices up. The second is a zero rate policy that basically eliminates yields in safe assets, forcing capital into risk on assets. So you got two forces coming in, pushing up prices. Now together, these two forces create a reflexive feedback loop, Liquidity pushes prices higher. Rising prices attract more capital, and momentum starts to build on itself, basically. And that's why quantitative easing environments, when they do play out, consistently produce outsized moves in risk on assets, especially cryptocurrencies and digital assets. And this is exactly where crypto comes into the conversation, because cryptocurrencies, the digital asset market, is the most liquidity sensitive asset class on the planet since 2009. Unlike equities, real estate, or even bonds, each with embedded cash flows, regulatory buffers, and slower capital rotation, digital assets and crypto, on the other hand, respond almost instantly to these types of shifts in global liquidity and, of course, monetary policy from central banks. So when quantitative easing begins and rates are near zero or at zero, capital and money is forced outward along the risk curve to take more risk in search of higher returns. And of course, that erodes purchasing power. Allocators are pushed into higher beta assets like crypto, not by optimism, but basically necessity. And nothing sits further up on the risk curve than crypto. That forced rotation of capital basically amplifies quantitative easing impact on digital assets more than any other asset class in the market. And crypto absorbs all that liquidity much faster because it's global, it's liquid, it's reflexive, and the returns outpace any other asset class. And that's the market structure. So that's why Bitcoin and other digital assets and cryptocurrencies consistently front-run policy pivots, and at the same time pricing liquidity expectations in way before equities, housing, or even inflation data catch up. So this is exactly why the correlation between global liquidity and crypto valuations is significantly stronger than any other market out there. And this is exactly why crypto offers the best, greatest risk-adjusted reward profile, and for the longest time has been the best performing asset class compared to all other asset classes out there. So for those that are interested in getting into crypto and digital assets and being strategic about it, you can look at I Trust Capital. It's a secure, straightforward way to invest, trade, buy, sell digital assets, including if you'd like to roll over a 401k into select digital assets with potential tax advantages. I highly recommend you check out I Trust Capital. I do use them. It's one of the platforms that I use along with a few others, but the interface is extremely clean, very intuitive. They offer institutional grade security, access to over 80 plus digital assets, including utility tokens. They're extremely secure, no monthly fees, and of course a simple flat 1% transaction fee. I did put the link in the description below, so if you're interested, check it out. Now, in closing, I just want to say that quantitative easing is just another monetary policy tool, but it's only used in emergency situations. Now, of course, it's the backbone of modern market behavior, and it's basically the Fed's last line of defense against systemic collapse. We're not there yet, but it looks like it's coming. It stabilizes markets in the short term, but it does that by forcing risk-taking and basically permanently destroying the value of fiat currencies. So, if you want to understand why the data and historical patterns I'm actually watching point to quantitative easing making a return in 2026, I actually break down my full detailed analysis and thesis on the market inside my newsletter and in my financial market intelligence group. So you can check that out, but stay sharp, stay liquid, and be strategic. Ignore all the news and the headlines. I'll see you next time.